Hey guys, welcome to the Way Wednesdays. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. Pastor Gary is with me. We're excited to go through the Torah portion together. We are at the latter part of the book of Numbers, and we've got a lot to cover. So, Gary, we probably better get into this thing. There is so much amazing stuff that,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
Like the Shabbat, we have a double portion of Torah this week. So to wrap up the last several chapters of the book of Numbers, we start from number 30 and we end clear at the end of 36, 13 in the Matot Maseh. Um, so let's jump in without any further ado, shall we?
Yeah, it sounds good. And it's been so fun going through the Torah. I mean, there's so much to it. Going through it, verse by verse, I think is just the greatest thing that a person could ever do when you go through the Bible. And what's so amazing is that we keep discovering more things that just jump out at us. I mean, I've been through the Bible, I don't know, dozens upon dozens of times. And you know, sometimes I just might get tired of a book, but then I go to the next one. I'm like, wait a second, that was in there. And then I go back and I cross-reference it, and it just gets more exciting the more I go through it. And not only is it just tickling my brain, but I'm discovering that I'm learning more about God. I'm understanding more of His character, which I just think is so awesome. And of course, that really is our goal, that we always want to keep at the
You
front
know,
of our mind.
it really is amazing, Doug, and that's why I think applying the words the living word, it really is living. It's because like anything that's living, it morphs, it changes, it takes on new character, it shows new insights.
Hmm.
Every time you open up the pages, it's like there's wow, that's there. Really, how did I miss that before?
I know.
But we see it in the light of our own maturing process,
Yep.
our own growing process, and our own transformation. And I tell you, people, if you're not transformed by the words in these books, then you need to slow down, take it a slower read, or do something. Because these are transformational words.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. And just on that same note, the living word is even more incredible when you go to the land where it happened. Israel 2021. We're going there on April 4th through the 15th, 2021. Go to our website. We've got information there, thewaycongregation.com. We've got the information. It's going to be an incredible trip, 11 days. The land portion of it is about 2,500 plus the flight. Just keep that in mind. But that is a really smokingly good price. Okay. So if money is a concern, we shopped hard for a really good price, and it's going to be an awesome tour, and you will not regret that you went with us. So please, we invite you to come check it out. But let's get into tonight's study. So Numbers chapter 31, and let me make sure that everybody can see my screen. I know sometimes it's a little bit small of font, so I will try to make it the right size. All right. So, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take vengeance on the Midianites for the children of Israel. Afterward, you shall be gathered to your people. So Moses spoke to the people, saying, arm some of yourselves for war, and let them go against the Midianites to take vengeance for the Lord on Midian. 1,000 from each tribe of all the tribes of Israel you shall send to the war. So they were recruited from the divisions of Israel, 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. Then Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 from each tribe. He sent them to the war with Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, with the holy articles and the signal trumpets in his hand, and they warred against the Midianites, just as the Lord commanded Moses, and they killed all the males. They killed the kings of Midian with the rest of those who were killed, Evi, Rakim, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. Balaam, the son of Beor, they also killed with the sword. And the children of Israel took the women of Midian captive with their little ones, and took as spoil all their cattle, all their flocks, and all their goods. They also burned with fire all the cities where they dwelt, and all their forts. And they took all the spoil and all the booty of man and beast. Then they brought the captives, the booty and the spoil, to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the congregation of the children of Israel, to the camp of the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. And Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the congregation went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses was angry with the officers of the army, with the captains over thousands and captains over hundreds, who had come from the battle. And Moses said to them, have you kept all the women alive? Look, these women caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to trespass against the Lord in the incident of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregations of the Lord. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man intimately. Keep alive for yourselves all the young girls who have not known a man intimately. As for you, remain outside the camp 7 days. Whoever has killed any person, and whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day purify every garment, everything made of leather, everything woven of goat's hair, and everything made of wool. Then Eleazar the priest took the men of war who had gone to the battle. This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord commanded Moses. Only the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead, everything that can endure fire, you shall put through the fire, and it shall be clean, and it shall be purified with the water of purification. But all that cannot endure fire, you shall put through water. And you shall wash your clothes on the 7th day and be clean, and afterward you may come into the camp. I'm going to stop there so that we can kind of discuss it a little bit. As I was reading through that, Gary, the thought that I kept having, I just kept thinking about the 144,000, right? There you have 12,000 from each of the tribes. Here we have 1,000 represented. But I just got this sense, because when we go through the book of Revelation, we see that God is still hot against the machinations of Balaam, right? He's obviously against Jezebel. He really has a vendetta against the woman that rides the beast, or Babylon, right? And they're all intimately connected right there. And as we just saw, it was Balaam that got the young ladies from Midian to go in, and we saw that even there was an Israelite man and a Moabitess that were in the entrance to the tent of the meeting, and they were crying, and then the little euphemism there, but they were moaning, in passion, shall we say, in this holy place. And that is what got the plague to go out against them, is that they cursed themselves by doing this. I mean, there's something in here that I think really needs maybe some uncovering.
That's a good point, and I never have made that connection. Talk about the living word. So here we have 12,000 going out, 1,000 from each tribe, and then and when we read a little bit later on, the miraculous victory that these guys had against overwhelming odds, and to take that times 12, so it's 12,000 times 12,000. That will be the 144,000, and God, it just struck me. It's like, wow, God is going to do a miraculous thing again with these 144,000 as we enter into these last days. So thanks for opening my eyes to that, because I had never made that connection.
No problem. Thank the Lord for opening eyes. I mean, I just, he's the one that opens our eyes. But I really think this chapter, among others, but this one especially, deserves a bit of time where we really tackle this tough topic. God is telling them to kill, some women, some of the children, and certainly the men. And this is very distasteful in our day and age. We would think, oh, this is terrible. How could you possibly do that? Right? So, you're supposed to keep the women and children alive. And I admit that that's kind of how I think too. But God, or at least Moses in this particular case, he says, have you kept all the women alive? Right? Look, these are the women that caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to trespass against the Lord of the incident of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man intimately. So, I think sometimes we tend to forget that this is a war, right? I mean, this is a war for their lives, right? They're fighting for their lives, and the Midianites, represented by their king, driven by his desires, but then backed up by the people, were trying to destroy. They were trying to destroy Israel, man, woman, and child, right? They wanted them cursed. In other words, they wanted them dead. They didn't have the wherewithal to go and go up against them in an actual battle. But if they could somehow do it through divination, if they could turn to using dark spiritual forces, and every time they tried to curse Israel, it was like Teflon, and it turned back into a blessing. And then Balaam's like, I've got a bright idea. Let's have the young ladies go in and seduce the young men so that they will then go and start worshiping Baal of Peor, which again is this really nasty stuff. And then they will curse themselves. Then God will lash out against these people. Right. So I think we have to put this in perspective, because it's chapters like Numbers 31 that are going to make it into Dawkins' book, right? The God delusion, right? Where he describes God, and he has this very poetic, long thing about God being a megalomaniac, et cetera, genocidal, whatever, misogynist, and add a few more explicatives and adjectives to describe how terrible God is. It's this kind of stuff that you can lift out of the Bible and just make it into a meme. See how terrible God is, right? The God of the Old Testament is such a lousy guy. He's so mean, and I just can't believe that people used to follow him. But it's not only the Richard Dawkins of the world, but it's also within the church. There is very much this underlying feeling that the God of the Old Testament really wasn't that nice. He was kind of into judgment a little bit too much. He was too much into vendettas and killing people. But then along comes Jesus, and now he's just all nice and lovey-dovey and gooey grace and all this wonderful stuff. And that idea goes back to Marcionism. So this idea that the God of the Old Testament, that was coined by Marcion. That idea that the God of the Old Testament was a bad guy, that was coined by Marcion, but it is still living in the messages and hearts of many people today. And this is,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
No, go ahead.
this is why we have to dig into it, So go ahead.
I was just going to say that the judgment does seem harsh, especially what do innocent children or young children, and I don't know how innocent they were, I can imagine, but and women, you would think, okay, well, what harm is there in keeping these people alive? And I think in this day of coronavirus, it's a lot more black and white. When we say, how do we stop a plague? Well, you kill all the bacteria, or all the virus spores, or whatever, all the things are. You don't get a disinfectant that is only 70% effective. You don't want to just kill all of them, because some of these spores, these virus spores, will come through, and they all need to be eradicated. Everything that brings about the plague needs to be eradicated. And this is where God knows much more than we do. And it was obvious they went into war saying, okay, we definitely know men can carry a sword, they have bows and arrows, they can take the javelin, whatever, and they're clearly a threat. What is clearly a threat to men is not always clearly the threat completely. And that becomes so important when we fight this spiritual battle day in and day out, because things that we may not necessarily see are actually against us. And we need to be cautious in that way. And it's hard with our eyes to discern what is right and wrong. So we really have to stay tuned to the Lord when it comes into going to battle and having him go before us in battle. We see that constantly over and over again. I will go before you in battle. I will send my spirit before you. I will send the hornets before you. Rarely does he say, you guys, good luck, go for it. We saw what happened when the spies came back from the land and they said, nah, these guys are too big for us. And clearly God was on their side then. And then, God says, okay, well, go wander in the desert. No, we'll go in and do it. And when they tried to do it in their own power, it led to defeat. So we definitely need to be walking lockstep in the Lord and knowing that he sees the entire picture. We may only see part of it, but the analogy I come up with is there was a plague that was affecting Israel, and they needed the disinfectant to wipe out the entire plague. And as unfortunate it is for us to understand, it included some of the women and some of the children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is hard. I mean, the thought of killing children is not a very nice idea. But this is, I think, at the very least, we need to be cautious when it comes to throwing stones at the Word of God, throwing stones at God Himself, and sitting in that place of judgment, right? Because there's definitely something that we don't fully understand. There's something about the spiritual battle that we cannot fully understand. We can get glimpses and ideas and aspects and vantage points of what was going on, but we probably can't see the whole thing. So, yeah, good thoughts. I'm going to take this question. This is from Jay Vela. He says, Adam Green had Gilad Atzmon on his show the other day, and he said the word shalom actually means security only to the Jews, not peace or love. Any insight on this would be much appreciated. Thanks. Well, it certainly means peace. It means security is, I think, an okay translation. That it only applies to the Jews. That, and again, I did not hear that actual broadcast, so I'm not saying anybody said something right or wrong. But insofar as the idea that it means security only to the Jews, that is not a true biblical concept. So shalom, it certainly means the lack of war, but it also means peace, prosperity, good times. And it doesn't really mean love. Love is a different word. That's ahava. There may be ahava with the peace. I mean, I think that's logical that if you have true peace, there's probably lots of love around. But the word itself doesn't specifically mean love. So I'm just kind of trying to parse that for you. So thanks for the good question. Well, let's keep going. There is a lot to do. We have many chapters that we're going to try to get through tonight. We'll do our best. All right. So now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, count up the plunder that was taken of man and beast, you and Eleazar the priest and the chief fathers of the congregation. Divide the plunder into two parts between those who took part in the war, who went out to the battle, and all the congregation. And levy a tribute for the Lord on the men of war who went out to battle, one of every 500 of the persons, the cattle, the donkeys, and the sheep. Take it from their half and give it to Eleazar the priest as a heave offering to the Lord. And from the children of Israel's half you shall take one of every 50 drawn from the persons, the cattle, the donkeys, and the sheep, from all the livestock, and give them to the Levites who keep charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. So Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. The booty remaining from the plunder which the men of war had taken was 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 persons in all, of women who had not known a man intimately. And the portion for those who had gone out to war, was in number 337,500 sheep. And the Lord's tribute of the sheep was 675. The cattle were 36,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 72. The donkeys were 30,500, of which the Lord's tribute was 61. The persons were 16,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 32 persons. So Moses gave the tribute, which was the Lord's heave offering, to Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses, and from the children of Israel's half, which Moses separated from the men who fought. Now the half belonging to the congregation was 337,500 sheep, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 persons. And from the children of Israel's half, Moses took one of every 50, drawn from man and beast, and gave them to the Levites, who kept charge of the tabernacle of the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. Then the officers who were over thousands of the army, and captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, came near to Moses. And they said to Moses, "Your servants have taken account of the men of war who were under our command, and not a man of us is missing. Therefore we have brought an offering to the Lord, what every man found of ornaments of gold, armlets and bracelets and signet rings and earrings and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord." So Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from them, all the fashioned ornaments, and all the gold of the offering that they offered to the Lord from the captains of thousands and the captains of hundreds was 16,750 shekels. The men of war had taken spoil, every man for himself. And Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from the captains of thousands and of hundreds, and brought it into the tabernacle of meeting as a memorial for the children of Israel before the Lord. All right, let's take a quick break there, Gary, and consider what we just read. There's a lot of numbers in there, right? But something that stuck out to me was that the people that went to war, it was 1 in 500. The one that didn't was 1 in 50. I don't know.
Right.
Any thoughts that you had?
Yeah, that was one of the concepts that I brought out, or that jumped out at me too, and I sort of quantified that into those on the front line get the greater reward. And so they kept more of the spoil, and I think that's a concept that we should exercise in the church today, and I think we do. People who serve in a ministry, and I don't mean just like Pastor Doug or myself, but people in praise and worship, people in the hospitality ministry, the greeters, people, ushers, people who work in the AV booth, people who serve get blessed in their service in so many different ways. They receive a greater reward just in the blessings and the sense of feeling that they have, knowing that they're serving, making the congregation work, making people happy, being a smiling face when visitors come through the door and things like that. And I thought that was a really solid principle, is that you get rewards. And I know, so I know I get blessed every week that we're at the congregation.
Right.
I love it, and I see that as a reward. Whether that turns up as a reward in heaven, we'll let
It
the
don't
Lord
really
sort
matter,
that
does
out.
it? Because you get to
Right.
enjoy it now. That's really a great point. And it's not just about monetary gain. It's about
Yes.
the sense that there's this fulfillment, right? There's this joy. There's this sense of, wow, I'm part of something. And whether you're serving at the Way congregation, or you're part of another congregation, or you're part of a whatever, when you give, you always get, right?
Yes.
That's what's amazing, is when you give, you actually are receiving. And part of it's just those warm, fuzzy feelings, this great sense of, wow. There may be some heavenly rewards as well for winning souls or teaching people or whatever. But it's also being part of this body, being part of a community. And again, it's not just our community. I mean, we are our community. That's why we talk about it. But we understand there's other communities out there. And we'd like to think that we're part of a bigger organism, a part of, we're just members of this bigger thing called the body of Yeshua. And yeah, it's a great point. And so, yeah, whether it translates into money or not is beside the point. It's that when you go out and you do that stuff, you're on the front lines, then you do receive a greater portion of the spoils, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
definitely encourage people that if you're just one of those people that sits in the pews, try your congregation, regardless of whether it's ours or the one that you're sitting in, they need your help. Step up and say, what can I do to help? How can I be of service? How can I be part of the body that makes this work other than sitting here in a pew or in a chair? I mean, sometimes it's as simple as keeping in prayer during the service, praying before the service, following up, connecting with people during the week. There's so many ways that you can be an active member of your congregation, of being an active part of the body. What happens to parts of the body that don't get exercise? Well, I mean, how many put on COVID pounds, right? Like, okay, so you're sitting around too much. If you're sitting around too much, that's a problem. You really do benefit by exercising your responsibility to serve in a ministry of some sort. You don't need to be a teacher. You don't need. Sometimes all it takes is a smile on your face, being friendly, knowing how to clean up, knowing how to set up chairs, knowing how to scrub toilets. You know, nothing is too great and nothing is too low for you to be involved in. So I just want to give that a word of encouragement to people that say, "Oh, what do I do?" You know, or for those people who try to be the first one out the door. Change your mindset.
Right.
You know, think about being part of the fellowship and a contributing member. The second thing I wanted to bring
Well,
up,
and it
go ahead.
really drives.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Please.
I was going to say the second thing I wanted to.
I was just going to say that it's about. I think
you go.
There's obviously a delay here. Okay, so this is about serving, right? Serving is what the kingdom is all about, right? And this it really goes back to where Satan was not willing to be a servant. As we look at the life of Saul, right? King Saul, before he became king, he was head and shoulders above everybody else. He was good looking. He was, well built. And they're like, yeah, that is what a king should look like, right? But it wasn't long before he set up a monument to himself. He sets up a monument to himself. And I think that is when he lost the kingdom, because it went from being a servant of God, even though he was a good looking servant and he was a well built servant. But then he started saying, hey, I'm actually good looking and I did all this stuff. Versus when God sent Samuel to Jesse's house, the first one that came out was Eliab. And Samuel's like, oh, this has got to be the one. This has got to be God's anointed. And God's like, no, don't look on the outside, right? Because the Lord doesn't look at the outside. He looks at the heart. And I think that is where we continue to trip up. We forget that the externals are of almost, maybe no value, maybe a tiny value, but not much value in God's kingdom. Think about Satan. He had all the external, all the external qualifications to be as good as God. And yet he lacked in his heart. He lacked the ultimate sense of being a servant, volunteering, laying down his life, sacrificing. He had nothing of that. And that's where Yeshua came and he taught us, he showed us what it looks like to be a servant. And I think this is something that a lot of us are afraid of. We're afraid that God's going to call us to do something and we have to give up everything and it's going to hurt and it's going to be like, I can't believe he's making me do this, And to be fair, I get it. Because I've been there. I'm still there to some degree. But as I walk a couple more years on this planet, I discover, okay, God is faithful. And the only things that he's trying to, quote unquote, take away from me are the things that actually have me in bondage. I think that I'm holding those things, but really it's those things are possessing me. And that's really the same thing that we see at Baal of Peor, is the people were free. They were blessed. And then these, pretty young girls came along and they said, hey, boys, come check out what we do over in our camp. And that's when they fell into bondage. That's when they fell into great distress and pain and sorrow. and it went bad for them. And so they had to then get rid of that. And when they finally did, look at the spoils that they took. Look at the blessings that came as a result of that. And that is something that if we're willing to let go of those things, it's called dying to ourselves. And I have this prayer probably a couple of times a week. I'm like, Lord, I need to die to myself, but I'm afraid to. I really don't want to, because dying to myself involves a little bit of pain. It involves, well, dying. Right? Who wants to die? I don't want to die. Dying does not sound like any fun at all. It sounds rather painful and quite unpleasant. But I understand that if I'm willing to let go of those things that I think are so important, then he will replace them with things that are of far greater and eternal value. And serving is really where it's all at. That's what Yeshua did. He modeled it for us. He did it to the nth degree, where he went to the cross, and he did it for people that had spit in his face, that mocked him. He's on the cross with nails in his hands and his feet. And what did he say? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So that's what was so incredible, is that he demonstrated it for us, and Satan was not willing to do that. That's the essence of God's kingdom. That really is.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. That's such a good word, especially that aspect of dying to yourself, and being able to give up a little bit of yourself. And you don't need to. I think people think you need to be all in. It's like, put your toe in the water. If you're a little bit timid, if you're a little bit, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. Try it. Try it. You'll like it. It really will be so fulfilling. And hopefully it'll start a lifetime of service. I can remember to this day, I was sitting in a church service. This was forever ago, and one of the elders came up to me and said, "Would you ever consider teaching a Bible study?" And had I never been asked, I probably wouldn't have done anything. So consider this your ask. Um, and I never stopped after that. I said, let me pray about it. I talked with my wife. We started into this, and it literally, it changed my life. It changed my perspective. It got me so deep into the Word on a regular, routine basis.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a blessing that still continues to this day. Um, and so consider this moment, this time, your ask. I'm asking you to step up, to serve in some capacity, whether you teach, whether you're an evangelist, whether you're a servant at heart, whether you're the one to wash people's feet, to clean the toilets, to take out the trash, to maybe you've got technical skills. You can work with sound, and maybe you're a musician. Maybe you've got a great voice. There are so many. Maybe you can just set up chairs and take them down and put them away. I tell you, that is a monumental piece of help to be able to do something like that. Um, you know, there are just so much. So tonight, consider this your ask. We're asking you, step up. And if you don't go to the way, you may be wherever you are in the world, your congregation, your community, your neighborhood,
Yep.
your family
Yep.
needs a servant.
That's right. Well, let's jump into chapter 32.
Hey, Deb, can I ask a question real quick? I know we
You,
got so much to cover, but
you sure can.
you really got me going at the beginning, talking about these men of war, the thousands that turn into 12,000, right? As 144,000.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, did you catch that there in verse 49 that not one of them got killed?
yeah.
Yeah,
Wasn't that
man. So
amazing?
you start to do the
Yeah.
math, and we don't know
Mm-hmm.
how many men there were of the Midianites, but there were 32,000 women who had not been intimate, so that were captives. So there were maybe not quite that many, but maybe that many or more women that were intimate with men, which meant there must have been that many men or more. So, 30 to 60,000 men, maybe even more, that were slain by this army of 12,000, and not one of them perished.
Wow.
So now look at what's coming in these end times with 144,000.
Wow.
And we see this stuff going on. And are they going to be as successful? Why not? I mean, this is a beautiful model. It just occurred to me as we put these things together. It's like, could that really be that these 144,000 go out and do this miraculous work, and not one of them is slain?
Well, and it's interesting that with the 144,000, what are they specifically known for? They're virgins, right? They have not known a woman, right? So
there you go. Yeah.
Right. There's that sense, because all throughout the book of Revelation, we see, starting in chapter 2, that God has a word against, I forget which church it is, maybe it's Sardis or one of those, but that they were doing the ways of Balaam,
right?
And then Jezebel, and then again we see that theme all the way through.
Yeah, all deal with sexual immorality and such. Yeah. So these guys are virgins. Wow, you just blew me away again.
Well, I mean, it's amazing when you have the kind of the bookends, right, and all this and stuff in between. And that's what really struck me as we were going through Revelation chapter 17 and 18, is that after all these years, God is still wrathful against Babylon, because Babylon is where all of that garbage started. And it's like, well, it's been a couple millennia, he's probably over that. No, he's not. He is still ticked off about it. And as we dug into those chapters, we discovered that this isn't something that was long ago, far away. This is right here and now, today.
Right.
This is happening right here and now. And it's not all in San Francisco. It's not just in Las Vegas. It's not just in, all those bad places in the world. It's happening in my city. It's happening in your city. It's happening in our neighborhoods. It's happening maybe on our TV. Ooh, that's a little too close for home, right? It might be happening, on our Facebook. It might be happening on whatever, we're consuming. We just have to be careful, right? And that's the challenge. Like, what are we consuming? So it definitely is worth looking at and saying, okay, Lord, am I consuming stuff that maybe I shouldn't be consuming?
Right.
And probably none of us is immune to that. So I know.
So shall we move on?
Let's do it. All right. Numbers chapter 32. Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of livestock. And when they saw the land of Yazer and the land of Gilead, that indeed the region was a place for livestock, the children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spoke to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, Atarot, Dibon, Yazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eleele, Shebam, Nebo, and Beon, the country which the Lord defeated before the congregation of Israel, is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. Therefore, they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us over the Jordan. And Moses said to the children of Gad and to the children of Reuben, shall your brethren go to war while you sit here? Now, why will you discourage the heart of the children of Israel from going over into the land which the Lord has given them? Thus your fathers did when I sent them away from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the heart of the children of Israel, so that they did not go into the land which the Lord had given them. So the Lord's anger was aroused on that day, and he swore an oath, saying, surely none of the men who came up from Egypt, from 20 years old and above, shall see the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, and Joshua the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. So the Lord's anger was aroused against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. And look, you have risen in your father's place, a brood of sinful men. to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will once again leave them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all these people. Then they came near to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we ourselves will be armed, ready to go before the children of Israel, until we have brought them to their place, and our little ones, who will dwell in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the children of Israel has received his inheritance, for we will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has fallen to us on this eastern side of the Jordan. Then Moses said to them, if you do this thing, if you arm yourselves before the Lord for the war, and all your armed men cross over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then afterward you may return and be blameless before the Lord and before Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. But if you do not do so, then take note, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. Build cities for your little ones and folds for your sheep, and do what has proceeded out of your mouth. And the children of Gad and the children of Reuben spoke to Moses, saying, your servants will do as my Lord commands. Our little ones, our wives, our flocks, and all our livestock will be there in the cities of Gilead. But your servants will cross over, every man armed for war, before the Lord to battle, just as my Lord says. So Moses gave command concerning them to Eleazar the priest, to Joshua the son of Nun, and to the chief fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel. And Moses said to them, if the children of Gad and the children of Reuben cross over the Jordan with you, every man armed for battle before the Lord, and the land is subdued before you, then you shall give them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they do not cross over armed with you, they shall have possessions among you in the land of Canaan. Then the children of Gad and the children of Reuben answered, saying, as the Lord has said to your servants, so we will do. We will cross over armed before the Lord in the land of Canaan, but the possession of our inheritance shall remain with us on this side of the Jordan. So Moses gave to the children of Gad and the children of Reuben, and to the half tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, and the land with its cities, within its borders, the cities of the surrounding country. And the children of Gad built Dibon, and Atarot, and Aroer, and Atarot, and Shofan, and Yazer, and Yog Beha, Beit Nimrah, Beit Haran, fortified cities and folds for sheep. And the children of Reuben built Heshbon, and Elealeh, and Kiryataim, Nebo, and Baal Meon, their names being changed, and Shibma, and they gave other names to the cities which they built. And the children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, went to Gilead, and took it, and dispossessed the Amorites who were in it. So Moses gave Gilead to Machir, the son of Manasseh, and he dwelt in it. Also Yair, the son of Manasseh, went and took 8 small towns and called them Havot Yair. Then Novah went and took Kenat and its villages, and he called it Novah after his own name. All right. That was interesting stuff there. So, yeah, this is actually the what inspired my title, settling for second best. I'm just posing the question, right? God had intended them to cross over the Jordan. They're like, it's pretty good here. Can't we stay here? So, did they settle for second best, or was it okay what they did? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts, I think it's okay what they did, because they went about it the right way. They didn't separate themselves from the community. They didn't separate themselves from the rest of the tribes. They went to their leadership. They inquired. I think if the decision had gone the other way, where it said no, the Lord says you're all going to be on the west side of the Jordan, they would have gone along with it. They may not have been happy about it, but we're not always happy about the answers that we get sometimes. Yeah, I think because they went about it the right way, with a reasonable justification. I mean, it's good land. We've got these. Hey, why not hang out here? Then I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they had great potential to do a lot of harm, but I tend to agree with you that they did go about it the right way. They didn't say, well, whatever, we're just going to do what we're going to do, right? So, they did not rebel in that, but they were like, hey, this looks like good land. Is it okay if we stay here? And I think you're right. They went about it the right way. They went to Moses and said, hey, we have a lot of sheep. This is good land for sheep. You mind if we stay here? Right. So, yeah, Moses, it seems like he almost like his blood pressure is rising a bit, right? But then he seems to kind of calm down a little bit. So he's like, if you guys don't come armed and fight, then you're in trouble, But they're like, we're gonna, right? And so they definitely went about their obligations. They kept their obligations. They did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah,
So I
and
think, yeah.
there was certainly a price to pay. I mean, you're
Mhm,
leaving your wives and children, uh,
mhm,
with perhaps a contingent of older men, while all the able-bodied men are away fighting war. Um,
mhm,
that's a lot of risk to take. So they had a
mhm,
lot of skin in the game, uh,
mhm,
and I think that was part of the arrangement too. And these are, I mean, in a very practical matter, these are things that we have to consider uh, as we face decisions in our life in terms of determining what the Lord wants us to do and how we go about it. Do we do it subversively? Do we sort of
mhm,
sneak around, the backside and hope we get away with things, uh,
mhm,
or do
mhm,
we approach things straight on and potentially, get the answer we're not looking for, or having to
mhm,
pay a price that we're unwilling to pay? Um,
mhm.
so I think that I think they're good here.
That's a good one. A price they were unwilling to pay. And I think that's what it comes down to a lot for the situations we find ourselves in is that, we can imagine all kinds of amazing things for our lives, but are we willing to pay the price? And I think that is, really that's where the money meets the road. Right? The rubber meets the road, and then money talks. Whatever. I'm mixing all my metaphors tonight, but anyway, something like that. So this is where it really gets serious, right? God's like, look, you can have anything you want. This anywhere you put the sole of your foot, it's yours.
Mhm.
But you have to actually walk and put the sole of your foot there and go conquer the territory. I'll give it to you, but you have to do something to get it. And this is where I think we have this sense of, um, easy getism, if you will, in Christianity. We just think if I just pray this prayer, then manna and gold dust is just going to fall from heaven, and I'll have it. And that is not something we see in Scripture.
Right.
There may be manna from heaven. That's true, but you have to go out and collect it,
Yeah.
right? He'll bring the quail to you, but you have to go out and collect it. So there's always something involved. There's what you said, skin in the game, and that is something that I think we try to pray away. We just try to pray and have God do these magical things where, well, God can do it, and if He wants to, He would. And he's like, that's typically not how God works, right? There may be an exception here and there, but I can't really think of any. You know, David took down Goliath. Was that God? Absolutely. Was it David? Yes, it was both, right? It was David who had the gumption, who had the guts to go out there when nobody else did, this little shepherd boy, and to take some stones and to go up against this giant of a man who was, probably 10 feet tall, crazy big, and say, I'm taking you down because God said I could. And I know He's with me and I'm going to do this. But he had to go and face the giant. That was scary. I would have been scared like all the other Israelites. But he went and did it. And that's the thing. You can get out of the boat and walk on water if you're willing to. We give Peter so much flack for, sinking, but did anybody else get out of the boat? Right? Nobody else got out of the boat and said, I'm going to try that too, right? They're like, I'm not getting out of this thing. I am staying planted in this boat. And God is always expecting us to do something. I mean, He tells us about having faith. If you have faith, just a tiny little mustard seed kind of faith, that's enough. That's enough to move mountains and uproot mulberry trees and, to walk on water. It doesn't take much at all.
Ultimately, you need to get off your seat and on your feet and
Hmm.
put in the effort.
Yep.
This stuff just generally does not happen without effort, and
Yep.
you and once you get moving, once you get some inertia going,
Hmm.
it really, I mean, the Lord just sustains you. He sees to your needs. He helps you through this. What
Hmm.
may be insurmountable, so much that we are paralyzed from moving forward
Hmm.
in our lives.
Yep.
He He's faithful to see us through that. But he requires that we take steps, uh,
Yes.
and so don't don't hesitate to do that.
Yeah.
The people just they just get paralyzed, and I've been praying, and I just haven't heard that God has told me to move or to do this
Right.
yet. Just
Yeah.
move, just move. He'll move you in
Well,
the right direction. You get
I know.
just get yourself going, and then
That's
he
right.
will guide your path.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, we think that every time there's going to be this big voice from heaven, or we're going to hear it, his voice echoing in our brain or something like that. Abraham heard from God a bunch of times, right? He was the father of the faith. God loved him. He called him his friend. I mean, he was like, God and Abraham, they're like that, right? And there were like 20, 25 years between God's utterances to Abraham. That's a long time to wait and to not hear from the master, right? So what do you do in the meantime? I'm not moving until God says something. Well, yeah, if he told you to stay here, good. But he also, he did give you a brain, and I'm sure that there are other things that you can do without having a specific word from the Lord. I'm amazed at how much authority God has given to the angels when they came to Nebuchadnezzar, who had that dream about the tree and getting chopped down, and then um, he has Daniel interpret it, and Daniel's like, I don't know if you really want to hear this, King. He's like, just come on, just give it to me. He says, okay, you're the great tree. You're going to get chopped down. This is by decree of the watchers, right? It wasn't by decree of God. It was by decree of the watchers who had determined this thing for Nebuchadnezzar's life. But were the watchers acting according to God's will? Yes, but it doesn't seem that they had, specific written instructions from God specifically in regard to Nebuchadnezzar. But they knew God's big plan, they knew God's heart, they knew his modus operandi, and they were acting independently within the parameters of what God has already established. And so this is what we have to understand, is that if we're acting within the parameters of what God has already established, if he said, go and take the land, then you go take the land. You don't have to, Lord, should I take another step here? Should I put my next foot forward? Should I put my next foot forward? Yes, do it. The order was take the land.
Mhm.
So if God has already told us, anywhere you put your foot, it's yours, or you can move mountains, or pray for this or that. You can have these things. Anything that you ask in my name, I will give you. That's a pretty big blank check, but we're too timid to write the check
Right,
most of the time
right.
because we're just like, well, I don't want to overstep my bounds. God's like, try me. I mean, can you really do anything more ostentatious than Joshua? Sun, stand still. God's like, whoa, I didn't. I gave you a blank check, but I didn't know you're gonna write, sun, stand still on the check here. And God's like, okay, all right, I'll do that. I mean, that was a big fat check that he wrote, and God cashed it for him. I mean, that's what's so amazing. I mean,
It's so true, Doug. And we are living in times where boldness and courage is so necessary, and people being willing to step up and take action and to walk in faith. There's no better time in our history than I can think of than in the days that we're living in and the days we're going into. Um,
mhm,
for this bold, courageous action. For those that will answer his call, and he is calling. You maybe are so muddled in your life and surrounded by noise that you don't hear it. Quiet down, settle down, listen to him speaking, understand what his call is, and then get off your seat and on your feet.
That's a good one. Let's do one more chapter. I think we have a little bit of time here just to see if we can get through one more chapter. We're not going to make it all the way through. I'm sorry, but hopefully people will read that.
This is kind of the travel journey chapter.
Do you recommend that we maybe go to chapter 34? I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's a recap of where we've been.
Which is good for certain research projects, but maybe not right now. All right. So here are the borders. We could perhaps skip this one as well, right? Because these are kind of the borders. Again, important stuff. All right, let's do laws concerning murder and bloodshed. All right, and the Lord, and the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, "Command the children of Israel that they give the Levite cities to dwell in from the inheritance of their possession. And you shall also give the Levites common land around the cities. They shall have the cities to dwell in, and their common land shall be for their cattle, for their herds, and for all their animals. The common land of the cities which you will give to the Levites, shall extend from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits all around. And you shall measure outside the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits. The city shall be in the middle. This shall belong to them as common land for the cities." For people that don't know, a cubit is about 18 to 20 inches, depending, but somewhere in that range. Now, among the cities which you will give to the Levites, you shall appoint 6 cities of refuge to which a manslayer may flee, and to these you shall add 42 cities. So the cities you will give to the Levites shall be 48. These you shall give with their common land, and the cities which you will give shall be from the possession of the children of Israel. From the larger tribe you shall give many, from the smaller you shall give few. Each shall give some of its cities to the Levites in proportion to the inheritance that each receives. So now we have the cities of refuge. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan in the land of Canaan, then you shall appoint cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person accidentally may flee there. They shall be cities of refuge for you from the avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation in judgment. And of the cities which you give, you shall have 6 cities of refuge. You shall appoint 3 cities on this side of the Jordan, 3 cities you shall appoint in the land of Canaan, which will be cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall be for refuge for the children of Israel, for the stranger and for the sojourner among them, that anyone who kills a person accidentally may flee there. But if he strikes him with an iron implement so that he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. And if he strikes him with a stone in the hand, by which one could die, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if one strikes him with a wooden hand weapon, by which one could die, and if he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. The avenger of blood himself shall put the murderer to death. When he meets him, he shall put him to death. If he pushes him out of hatred, or while waiting and lying in wait, hurls something at him so that he dies, or in enmity he strikes him with his hand so that he dies, the one who struck him shall surely be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. Moreover, if he pushes him suddenly without enmity, or throws anything at him without lying in wait, or uses a stone by which a man could die, throwing it at him without seeing him, so that he dies, while he was not his enemy, or seeking his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood according to these judgments. So the congregation shall deliver the manslayer from the hand of the avenger of blood, and the congregation shall return him to the city of refuge, where he had fled, and he shall remain there until the death of the high priest, who was anointed with the holy oil. But if the manslayer at any time goes outside the limits of the city of refuge where he fled, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the limits of his city of refuge, and the avenger of blood kills the manslayer, he shall not be guilty of blood, because he should have remained in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the manslayer may return to the land of his possession. And all things shall be a statute of judgment to you throughout your generations and all your dwellings. Whoever kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of witnesses. But one witness is not sufficient testimony against the person for the death penalty. Moreover, you shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death. He shall be surely put to death. And you shall take no ransom for him who has fled to his city of refuge, that he may return to dwell in the land before the death of the priest. You shall not pollute the land where you are, for blood defiles the land, and no atonement can be made for the land, for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. Therefore do not defile the land which you inhabit, in the midst of which I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell among the children of Israel. Boy, there is some great stuff in there, Gary.
Absolutely.
Wow. I mean, we could spend another hour on that. Don't worry, we're not gonna, but we could. Okay. I mean, there are just some amazing nuggets in there. I mean, there's just a lot of things that were jumping out at me. First of all, a murderer shall be put to death. I mean, God's like, look, a life for a life, right? It's not excessive, but it's not lesser. And I find it so strange that there are so many people that think that the biblical ways were so antiquated and so brutal. But is locking somebody up in a cage for 30, 40, 50 years, is that better? Is it better to put out the incredible resources between $100,000 to $200,000 per year per person that we lock up? Is that really a better way to go about it? Is it better to release that person after they have been institutionalized for 20, 30, or 40 years, and then they get out, they're a convicted felon, they cannot vote, they almost certainly cannot get a job because nobody wants to hire a convicted felon. They don't know how to live in the outside world anymore. They're shunned from society. Is that really better? I think this is what we have to ask ourselves. Is our system really better than that? And we have, 2 or 3 million people in America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. We have that many people incarcerated. It's crazy. And people will say, well, what if they're not really guilty? Well, look, the possibility of a mistrial is real. We understand that. But what we don't see in our text is that if you are a false witness, if you're a false witness, you say something about somebody that's not true, whatever penalty that person would have suffered now falls on you, right? So if I go and I start making claims against Gary, and it turns out that I'm lying, then whatever penalty he would have gotten per the charge that I was making against him falls on my shoulders. So guess what? I am not really incentivized to make false claims about him. And the other thing I was looking at, Gary, is the avenger of blood. Again, there's this sense of, oh, this is mob justice or something like that. But no, it's not, right? They had no police force. They had no attorneys. The avenger of blood was both he was a prosecuting attorney, and he was the policeman who went out and got him, and he was potentially the executioner, though probably not by himself. All right, if we kind of look at some other passages, right? So, if somebody in my kin, from my kin, is killed, it's my responsibility to go and hunt down the person that did that. But notice that if somebody flees, they have to have a trial. Everybody has to have a trial, right? You can't just go and say, you killed my father. My name is Niego Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. That's not the idea, right? This isn't just, I'm going to get you because you killed my daddy. No, you have to. Yeah, that you're supposed to go out, but that person would then be taken to the judges. He would have had a trial. And then if he were found guilty, because they were supposed to diligently look at the evidence, and it could not just be on the evidence of one person, right? You had to have witnesses. So the avenger of blood would necessarily have had to bring eyewitnesses and say that, yes, we saw this person kill this guy, and here are the circumstances, right? So you have to have different testimonies. And if you have different testimonies, that means you need a judge. And then once that person has been convicted, then it's death by stoning. That's how it was done. And it's not just one person who throws a stone at somebody. It's a whole group, right? It is now the community that's saying, yes, we have found you guilty. And now we, the community, stand in support of the verdict, and we stand on the law that God has told us, and now you must be put to death because you killed this person in cold blood.
Yeah, I think that's a key component, and it's no mistake that the idea of how to set up the community, how to lay out the community, is at the first part of this chapter, because it establishes this community mindset. And so you have this community that operates as a community, and people understand that justice is swift and sure. People might argue it's like, well, if you incarcerate a murderer, isn't there a chance that he could be rehabilitated? Well, the idea is to keep that thought of murder from even entering the mind before the murder happens. A way you do that is through community, by living in this, by living in a community. These guys were like-minded, but not. They had disagreements, they had arguments, they had the hostilities towards one another, I'm sure, like any group of people living together. But they understood that justice, what justice was, that justice was certain, and that justice was swift, that they were not going to be keeping me around, and I'd have like 14 appeals before they finally carry out something, and by that time they'll probably turn over the law anyway. And so all of these things play into the mind of somebody who is contemplating a murder or contemplating slaying a neighbor or doing something like that. So you have this preventative aspect of murder. So these things, I would like to think, I don't know for certain, were more rare than they are today, where it's like, okay, hey, I might get away with it because we don't really live as a community and nobody wants to rat me out. Everybody's afraid of getting involved. All of these things that contribute to, I might just get away with the thing. And if I do get caught, then it's going to be wrapped up in court forever. And, I'll throw my luck at a trial. And if I do happen to get incarcerated, I get 3 straights, a day and a place to sleep. And get to hang out with my buds.
Right. It's not always that it's not exactly a picnic in many high
I'm sure.
of course. But I can't help but mention it, the O.J. Simpson case, right? If you've got enough money, you can hire good lawyers and they can somehow get you off. We all know the guy was guilty, right? I mean, the glove fit. Come on, right? The glove fit, right? And so the system in ancient Israel was not based on how much money you had in order to pay a really smoking good lawyer. It was, no, we have witnesses that saw you do that. On the other hand, if you don't have witnesses, then maybe, then murder is certainly, it could happen. Murder can always happen. But again, there have to be eyewitnesses. Now, it is an interesting question whether they had to actually see the guy do it, or by eyewitnesses, do they mean that there is enough witness to say, well, I know that the guy wasn't normally where he is, and that, could it be a little bit of forensic, not like we have today, of course, but, looking at the various pieces of evidence. That would be very interesting. I'd love to ask a Jewish scholar on the law. What
does
is
the
their
guy come home? Does he have blood on his clothing?
right,
That type of
right,
thing. And this guy is all of a
right,
sudden missing, and you knew there was a long-standing grudge between the two or whatever. Yeah,
right,
that would be really interesting to see how
yeah.
uh, the courts were
And
handled.
yeah, and I just don't know, all right? I just don't know, but it's kind of my sense that one reason we often hear about Jewish lawyers is because the ones that spend time in the Torah have really dealt with these kinds of issues for much of their life. They've been looking at the law and they have a sense of, well, this is how it works. It doesn't mean that every Jewish lawyer is necessarily a good lawyer or a bad lawyer, but that may be one reason that there might be a little higher percentage of them that go into law, perhaps.
So
But yeah,
go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt. So then going into the aspect of the accidental death,
hmm
that is very interesting as well, because
right,
there's still a price to pay uh,
hmm
for taking one's life. You're separated from your family. You can't leave this town. There is ultimate release when the high priest dies, um, and and but there's still a sense of justice that takes place. Um,
hmm
and, and in that sense, it helps you be careful in the work that you do. You know, it's
hmm
sort of like their own little idea of OSHA. It's
hmm
like, okay, I'm going to make sure that all my tools are in good shape so my axe handle's not going to go flying off, or my axe head's going to fly,
right.
whatever.
That's
I'm going
right.
to make
Yeah,
sure that things are in good repair. My
that's
home
right.
is in good repair. I don't cause an accidental death.
Right.
There's such wisdom in this book. It's amazing.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's right. It's preventative because there is still a cost, right? If you kill somebody accidentally, yeah, your axe head flies off, right? There's a whole chapter about, or several passages about that. Yeah, well, make sure that your axe head is well fastened on before you start going and chopping trees when your neighbor is with you, right? So it's so true that yeah, we have OSHA nowadays, right? So I think that's a great point. It's really a great point. And then what's interesting is really in the last part of this chapter, he says that you shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death. He shall be put to death. And you shall take no ransom for him who is fled to a city of refuge and may return. It says, so you shall not pollute the land where you are, for blood defiles the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. Therefore, do not defile the land in which you inhabit, in the midst of which I dwell, for the Lord, for I, the Lord, dwell among the children of Israel. I mean, that's a very interesting statement. And when you think about in Revelation chapter 16, where you have the bowl that's being poured out, here you have the third, actually the second and third angels. So the second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it became blood as of a dead man, and every living creature in the sea died. Then the third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel of the waters saying, "You are righteous, O Lord, for the one who is and who was and who is to be, because you have judged these things. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink, for it is their just due." I mean, that's some pretty interesting stuff right there. First of all, that we have an angel of the waters is kind of interesting. But secondly, that the blood that has gone down on the land, or at least in the oceans and such, now it's their just due. I also think about Isaiah 26, where it says that the land will not disclose, the land will disclose the blood that has been shed upon it, right? So the earth is going to give back this blood. It's going to give back this blood that's been shed upon it, from Abel to the last person that's murdered. That blood that's gone down into the land by murder, by abortion, by any kind of unjust letting of blood, all right, whatever that includes. Obviously, all the wars, etc. Right? All of that is going to come back because it pollutes the land. I mean, if blood pollutes the land and it's cumulative, ooh, that's scary, right? Because now we have how many millennia of blood being shed upon the land, right? I mean, the first blood that touched the land was Abel's, of course, and then God says, "Hey, Cain, where's your brother? Well, I'm my brother's keeper. Hey, your brother's blood is calling out from the land." Right? So there's something about that. There's something about that blood when it goes into the earth. There's some power, there's some spiritual force that it contains, and it just cries out. There's something that is not good about it. And it says that there is no atonement for the land, because to atone means to cover. You cannot cover it because it's gone down into the land. So how can you in any way cover? You can't put more blood on it to cover it, right? So there's no sense of undoing this until it's finally all undone. And I think that is the reason why at the time of the tribulation, we're going to have the waters, the oceans, the rivers, all the springs of water are going to turn to blood. I think it's all the blood since Abel that's been shed upon planet Earth is going to come back as a judgment against the earth. And that's pretty scary.
It is, and then certainly blood up to the bridles in that last great battle. Oh my gosh, there's a lot, um, to be cleaned up there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we got through 3. Well, actually, if you count the ones that we skipped, we got through 5 chapters, Gary.
Not bad.
No, that's not bad. All right, so everybody, your homework is to read chapter 36 on your own. Sorry, we couldn't get through all of it, but we did quite a bit. Man, there's so much in God's word, and when you read it, you're like, oh, I just discovered something new, right? And Gary, I know that you and I just love discovering new things, and I just encourage everybody out there to say, you know what, just keep reading it and reading it again. And you're like, why should I read this book? I've already read it once. Read it again. You'll discover new things. And as you then start to cross reference, when you start cross referencing, then your mind is just blown, right? Because you're like, wait a second, right? Like what I just did in Revelation 16. Again, when I read that and I'm like, wait a second, that was like Cain. I'm like, my mind was blown. I'm like, that's amazing. And that's what makes it so exciting. That's when you really just get jazzed. You're like, I got to read more in this book, because the way that it has these cross connections, and I just see these little pathways, these highways going from this verse to that verse. It's like synapses in a brain, and the more you can connect, the more you're just like, right. So it's pretty exciting stuff. And
Absolutely, and I can't emphasize enough the need just to not be hearers of the word, readers of the word, learners of the word, but be doers of the word. And if anything stands out from this double portion that we went through tonight, it's like step up, do something, read the word, meditate on its words, ask God how He is going to guide you into action, and then take that step. There may not be this great revelation that comes to you and says, okay, you're going to be doing this. Maybe it takes a step first, but you'll be learning, hearing, and reading the word as you're walking out in faith, knowing that God is going to support you and go before you all the way. Step up, do something in your congregation, do something in your community, do something in your family that glorifies and honors the Lord.
Amen. Thank you, Brother Gary. Take care.